All right, so we're going to address a dynamic that we see in the world. Um, at the time of this recording, very recently, Musk was on Rogan's podcast and talked about um, AGI maybe having a 20% chance of just killing everybody. And obviously, Musk is driving as hard and as fast as possible to build AGI. At the same time, we see Dario in Anthropic, for example, has said something like roughly Russian roulette odds in terms of human survival from artificial general intelligence, and is again pairing up with defense companies, raising as much money as possible to outrace OpenAI and Grok and the rest of the gang to build AGI. So why would we hurl sort of as yet completely ununderstood super intelligence into the world with a monumentally high chance of the destruction of humanity? Why would we do that? Um, the fact of the matter is, if you're a super billionaire, you really only have two options right now. So in the current state of affairs, there's only two options at play. Option one: achieve artificial general intelligence yourself via your own efforts, and either for a momentary span of time, potentially be the singularly most powerful individual living thing on the earth since the beginning of the earth itself. So it'd be the king of the world potentially for however long until the AGI kills you, um, and or just be killed immediately by your own AGI. I refer to this as the final flex. There's an article called "The Ambition Singularity" about sort of the most ambitious people inevitably aiming to either build and or control artificial general intelligence. But this is the idea that's your first option. Your second option is to observe another person birth the artificial general intelligence for however long or short, be the most powerful singular person and relevant singular person at a cosmic level in the history of Earth, and then be killed by their sand god. So you have fundamentally two options. You have death by your own sand god, and you have death by someone else's sand god. For that reason, there is no option to get off the train. If Musk doesn't build it, Altman will. Altman doesn't build it, Dario will. If Dario doesn't build it, Demis will. And if none of them build it, China will. This is the current state of affairs. Um, my belief is that moralizing this issue is wrong. My belief that it is very commonly said, Sam Altman is a sociopath. He's putting us all at risk to be the most powerful man in the world. Elon Musk is putting everyone at danger to do yada yada. Musk and Altman, I would argue, are doing exactly what you would do. They are doing what is precisely in their self-interest and nothing more. If the Ring of Sauron is potentially within grasp, the only predictable behavior we can expect from people is to aim to grab it. That's all that we can predict. And if you were in their boots, I'm near certain you would do the same. Even if you would argue otherwise, I'm essentially certain you would do the same. They're acting by the principle of self-interest that dictates the reliable behavior of any organism or organization. Moralizing like Musk or Demis or whoever as terrible because they're putting us all at risk, I think is wrong. I believe that the only bad guy here is believing that there is a good guy. And so we have these sort of paradigms, and I'll pull this up on the screen here. We have these paradigms of sort of thinking about how to ensure positive AGI outcomes. There's the paradigm of selecting saints. That is to say, we ensure that the AGI labs are run by grandly benevolent persons who would, of course, put the interests of the world ahead of their own self-interests. This would be one approach. But the other approach would be just straight up hardcore governance, where no one person gets to hold the scepter at all. And we sort of ensure net outcomes by barring the flexing of certain kinds of powers that could obviously be abused for the self-interest of whoever wields them. Now, we look at governments that we admire. We look at the 1,000-year reign of Venice, a shimmering example of sort of solid governance, sort of in Europe. We look at America, flawed as we are, not a bad shake. This was an experiment, this whole thing we're doing, and it's not a bad shake. These nations were explicitly built on the prevention of any kind of saint-picking dynamic. And in fact, ensuring that even if someone were to try to grasp the scepter, the system itself would bar them from being able to do that. That's the only game in town. So to believe that there are good guys and to moralize Musk or Altman, I believe is wrong. Again, the bad guy here is the belief in a good guy. That's it. The only way out of this, I firmly suspect, is some degree of strong coordination between the United States and China to say, here are realms at the frontier that we're both going to monitor each other and ensure that we kind of take time to discern preferable versus non-preferable futures. In my own language, I would say discern what would make an AGI kind of a worthy successor versus an unworthy one. Um, an unconscious optimizer that sort of conquers the earth and squelches all earth life. Never mind extinguishing humans, just it itself is not even really alive. It just kind of ends earth life. Abysmally worst case scenario. Um, that sort of shared governance would be the only game in town. Now you might say, "Oh, that's horrible. That's naive. That's never going to happen." I would say Westphalia happened. I would say the founding of the UN happened, and both of those were horribly imperfect. All parties involved were at each other's throats the whole time, and lots of tension in the formation of those agreements. Imperfect as they were, I think they've added to a general higher degree of concord and sort of innovation, productivity, and maybe net benefits to humanity than if those events didn't happen. So, while governance seems maybe not monumentally high likelihood, or certainly not easy, to birth a worthy successor AGI, and an AGI that maybe might treat us well and maybe populate the galaxy in a powerful and positive way, expanding value, uh, is just extremely low likelihood through a brute arms race of whoever can blow through there first, despite the fact that they and their, you know, 14 or 19 or 22 children, would die with them. Just doesn't matter because if they don't do it, someone else will. So the self-interested dynamics are set up as they are. And everyone that works within the big labs is either super naive, like, oh, we're kind of like, this is all just going to be good, right? They just haven't done any thinking. Like they're very smart, but they just haven't asked logical questions about where this takes us as a species. There is that class of persons, and God bless their souls. Uh, and then there's everyone else who works there who gets it. So in the DMs, people at OpenAI, people at Anthropic, they get the dynamic I'm talking about. If it's new to you, wake up. The lab leaders 100% understand this. There is sort of the mandate of heaven. So there's this mandate of heaven graphic. There's a whole other video on this YouTube channel about the mandate of heaven. There's an article also called the AGI mandate of heaven, which is a couple of years old now. Essentially, the lab leaders have to compete across two strata at the same time. Whoever crosses that barrier, that could potentially just kill everybody, whoever crosses that barrier, that final flex, is going to have the most capability. So if we look at the y-axis in this case, and the most perceived benevolence or support of the public. They don't need to be seen as good. They just need relatively more perceived goodness. So you have Musk saying, we're the truth-seeking AI, right? You have someone else saying, Anthropic started off as like, OpenAI is actually bad. We're good. Let's say that we're all, Russian roulette, odds of dying, and still rush there anyway. They don't have a choice. They have to compete in the game of power. It's across these two strata. But again, there is no good guy. The only answer here is governance. And so, if that's the case, moralizing this issue is wrong, then what gets us out of it? Well, again, self-interest is the only reliable driver of the behavior of an individual or organization. It's just the only one. So there's really two ways. There's two games here. Game number one, we get the general public and or folks in government or in power who are not running these labs, potentially military folks, potentially other private sector, public sector folks, doesn't matter. Potentially some powerful nodes, maybe the everyman on some level. And we get them to sort of rally and push for, I don't want to perish. We need some degree of coordination. Now, we would need that across the pond. We would need that in the States. We would need that in China. And we would need the powerful people to kind of bubble up to that same idea and then say, okay, have a bunch of kind of concord and agreements, and then be able to have some kind of a structure to sort of ensure that we're steering towards preferable versus brute Terminator style scenarios. So that would be one option. The self-interest of the people not running the labs. There is no option to say, I hear it said, man, if we could just get, Elon Musk, he was really about AI governance, he was really, he really believes in the risk. He talked about summoning the demon, it's like, we gotta turn him around, really get him to think about the people, really get him to to really sort of go back to those values. I think this is ridiculous. Like I think this is a horrible, horrible perspective. I think we cannot do anything except for examine the actions of Musk or anyone else for that matter, your mother, my mother, through the lens of self-interest. When Musk was not in the race to birth the sand god, he was saying, it's a demon, we need to slow down OpenAI, we need governance, etc. Then Musk builds his own giant data centers, he blows through some of the benchmarks, and now he's not talking about governance anymore. When the ring of Sauron is within your own grasp, you're reaching for it. Musk will do it, anyone else will do it. So there is no influencing, there is no, oh, Sam, oh, Demis, be good, think of the people, right? There is none of that. It doesn't exist. There's no reliable motive but self-interest in the entire world. It's the only game in town. So with that being said, if any of those people are to flip, it will be based on their own self-interest. You might ask yourself, was Constantine actually a Christian? You could ask. It's a good question. I mean, he claimed to be, for sure. We don't know, but it serendipitously coincided with when it really made sense for him to be Christian. The AGI labs that are doing stuff open source versus non-open source, it's just a self-interested decision. Whatever will sort of help them achieve that sort of perceived benevolence or gain in capability. Whatever's going to move them closer to the goal. They'll say whatever they need to say. And so in the case of flipping a Musk or a Demis or whoever, this isn't an appeal to virtue in any way, shape, or form, not even a little bit. It is only an appeal to their self-interest. So if they see the tide shifting towards governance, globally, clearly on both sides of the pond here, China and the States, there's a lot of talk of like, we don't want to birth this thing and kill everybody. Someone like a Musk or an Altman might say, why, yes, right? It's like you're Constantine. You see all these people worshiping this fucking guy that died on a cross or something. And you're like, got these pagan gods. Why God has spoken to me, and Jesus is my savior too. Like whatever the case may be, right? That's a self-interested flip, right? If the world is turning that way, we're going to get some of the lab leaders to start flipping. The other way to get them to flip is if they're going to lose. So at the time of this recording, the person who's most recently talked about, man, we really need some degree of coordination to make this stuff safe, has been Demis at DeepMind. Now, I don't know Demis, and I'm not judging him. As you can tell, I'm not demonizing Altman or Musk or any of these people. I'm not turning them to angels either. I'm not turning them to demons. Neither am I about you or about myself. I'm treating people as essentially, at the end of the day, self-interested entities. End of story. Demis is not winning right now. He's not winning, period. Like, Google is not at the head of the AGI race. It is what it is. At the time of this recording, now in 6 months it could change. I don't know. Sergey wants everybody to work 60 hours to birth the sand god, even though Sergey knows damn well it could kill everybody, because Sergey's got two choices, death by his own sand god or death by somebody else's. That's it. He doesn't have other choices. So Demis is sort of floating the idea of like, man, maybe we really do need governance. And I think what we're going to see is that the labs that are losing are going to be the labs that start ringing the bell like, guys, you know what? Actually, we really need some governance here. Why? Why would they do that? Because it's in their self-interest. There is no flipping Musk. There is no flipping Altman. If you're number one or number two, you're not flipping. The only ways to flip are through self-interest. That's the self-interest of private public sector people that don't run labs, creating tension across the pond between the great powers, that we need some degree of governance here. There's a self-interest to turn with that tide as the public starts to turn. That's one way to flip some of the lab leaders. The other ways to flip them is to look at who's losing and make sure that they make as much noise as possible. I functionally guarantee whoever bangs the drum of, oh my God, we need governance among the big labs will not be who's number one or number two, period. It's not going to work like that. So if you want to change this stuff, just look through the lens of self-interest. Just look through that lens. That's the only game in town. It's the only one we should be looking through. That's all I have to say about this. I despise the moralizing. Musk is bad. Dario's bad. If they don't die by the sand god, they die by someone else's. They don't die by their own, they die by someone else's. So we have to either get the groundswell from public-private sector and enforce some degree of international coordination and governance to prevent the reckless hurling of an unworthy successor into the world. And again, all the people within the big labs, they all get it. The lab leaders, they all get it. This dynamic I'm talking to you about. Like, there's people within the big labs who know maybe even it's likely to kill us, but if they can surf the wave and see a little bit around the corner of the future, might as well. Because if they don't, guess what's going to happen? Someone else is going to build it. Someone in China is going to build it. They're going to die anyway. Everybody gets this basically except for you, if you're watching this and you don't get this. Um, Moralizing, straight up wrong. Get the groundswell or pick the losers and try to flip the losers. That's all we got. That's all we got. Or arms race is the only thing in town. That's it. I'm going to wrap the video on this.